Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan and I'm a lecturer of philosophy at the National University of Singapore. So as Noblia introduced just now, I specialize in both Chinese philosophy and the philosophy of computing and AI and technology. We consider issues of societal and ethical implications of all these things. Now today, I'm very excited to talk to you about breaking barriers, how technology is revolutionizing DEI. And I have a very interesting scenario for us to consider. This is by the philosopher John Rawls. He says, imagine this scenario where you are behind what he calls a veil of ignorance. You suddenly forgot who you are. You don't know what kind of background you come from, your ethnicity, your race, your gender. You don't know if you're in a privileged situation or an underprivileged situation. Now, in a situation like this, if you are going to exit this veil of ignorance to enter back into the real world, you may be in a situation where you're privileged or underprivileged. So, since we're in a situation where we don't know, don't you want to be in a world where the playing field is level? So even though you may actually come from an underprivileged position, we are able to create a situation where you can quickly get up to speed to fully realize your potential just as much as people who are in privileged positions. Wouldn't that be a very wonderful world to be in? So this is basically the idea behind equity. The idea of how can we create conditions for a level playing field. Now, when we talk about breaking barriers, there's actually two kinds of barriers that we can actually try to break. The first is empowering the disadvantaged to realize their potential. And this is what we refer to as equity. And this will be the first part of today's discussion. Now, there is a second barrier, and that is about how do we empower people to build on each other's strengths to go further. Because, you see, even if we can realize our potential fully, there's only so much we can go. So we can only go so far. But if we're in a situation where we can work together with other people, that synergy can actually empower us to go even further, to break the next barrier, to be better, even better versions of ourselves. So let me focus on the first topic, which is equity. How can we empower people so that we're all on the same playing field together? But in order to answer that, we do need to ask the question, why is the playing field unlevel in the first place? So there's actually four reasons, and I'll go into depth into them, right? The first, it has to do with behavioral differences, especially in the workplace, right? That many times we ourselves are unaware of the ways that other people may behave differently due to differences in personality, gender, culture as well. And then there are also issues of systemic biases, things that already disadvantage people from realizing their potential at the workplace. And of course, there's also personal biases. We sometimes carry our own prejudices that then disadvantages other people. Now, the last thing that I'm going to talk about is also inherent filters. There are things that are natural, built into processes and selection criteria that can cut off people unintentionally. So let's dive into it. All right. The first. Now, let me give you an example from medicine. In the area of medicine studies, they found out that actually women have a tendency to underreport their pain, especially when they are seeing male doctors. Now, imagine this situation. For the longest time, a lot of male doctors don't realize this. So what's going to happen? They see a female patient, they hear what a female patient says, they think that the females are reporting pain the same way as males, but they don't realize that there is this difference in behavior, and so oftentimes a lot of the pain treatment and management is undertreated for women. So that is one example of behavioral differences that we may be unaware of. A second one, which will be the systemic biases, right? In medicine, they also found that doctors in general, have a tendency to play down the pain that women report as well. Why? Because some doctors, they have a certain prejudice that people, that the females will play up the experience of pain. And this personal bias, this personal prejudice actually gets in the way in their perception of the pain that's being reported and also the treatment that they diagnose and prescribe. Now, we can link this back to the workplace, and it's important to draw this connection that behavioral differences, ignorance of the behavioral differences can actually lead to these kinds of societal misunderstandings. And it can create a certain feedback loop between the person and society. So if I'm in the situation where I'm being, where people think I'm playing up my pain, what's going to happen? I will think that it's the normal thing for me to underreport. Yeah? And so instead of thinking that, oh, there's something wrong with the world, I start to think, oh, there's something wrong with me. And so then I normalize the problem and stay silent. So this is one reason why there are a lot of unequal playing fields in the world that we may not be aware of, because we have grown normalized, used to it as a normal thing in society. Now, another example of differences in culture has to do with the way we report about our activity and work. Yeah? Some cultures, people are more verbose. They are more willing to come forward and give their status updates. Hey, I'm doing this now. Oh, look, I'm doing this now. Oh, I have some questions for you. And then they say, oh, how about this other issue that I'm working on? Yeah. But then there are also other cultures where they think that where people from those cultures think that it's actually not very polite. It's not very nice to keep bugging their superiors. And so what then happens is that they stay silent for as long as possible to minimize their disruption to their superiors. So like in this case, the speech bubble on the right, the person says, does all the work very silently, and only at the end says, okay, sorry for the silence, here's the update that you requested. Now you notice that if we are unaware of these kinds of cultural differences in behavior, we may think that the person on the left, the blue text bubbles, is actually more hardworking than the person on the right. Yeah? So ignorance of these kinds of cultural behaviors can lead to misjudgments of people's performance. Now then, I have the next point, which is this. Consider something very, very simple and innocent, like first come, first serve registration. Let's say you want to send your child for childcare center, right? And let's say this is a very popular childcare center, and they say registration is only on a first come, first serve basis on a Tuesday, 10 a.m. Now, you might think, why Tuesday, 10 a.m.? So weird, right? But let's think for a moment, take a step back. Who are the people who find it easy to come forward and register their children on a Tuesday, 10 a.m.? You start to notice that there are actually built-in filters, right? Some, like if you compare blue-collar jobs and white-collar jobs, who has it easier to apply for leave or to just come out of work to do the registration on behalf of their child? Yeah. So the white-collar will tend to have it easier. And if we say within the white-collar jobs, who has it easier? Junior entry-level staff or senior staff, right? We notice the disparity and the differences. Of course, we may say, Tuesday 10 a.m., that's terrible. Why don't we then shift it to nighttime? The problem still exists because there will be people who cannot come forward to register in the evening. Again, another example would be this. This is a report by the University of California where they actually did a study on direct admissions. So what's the idea? People, for the longest time, people have been saying, the people in higher socio-economic classes have it easy when it comes to academics and grades because they have access, they can afford all the educational resources, tuition and all that. And so then they say the poorer students are disadvantaged. So then what's the solution? They say direct admissions is a great way to equal the playing field. Now, this task force found that this innocent proposal turned out to be quite damaging. Because why? If we admit people on talent like sports, music and art, guess what? Families with more disposable income are able to enroll their children for sports, music and art. And therefore, we thought that this criteria of talent levels out the playing field, but it actually doesn't. So the point is, processes and selection criteria can have built-in filters. They can unintentionally exclude certain groups of people, and if we're not aware of this, we may exclude people without realizing it. Then this is how we are also creating unequal playing fields. If you like, sometimes you can organize initiatives, and we invite people in the organization, hey, come forward for this. Sometimes there are built-in filters that prevent people from stepping forward. So just a recap, these are 4 of the main reasons for lack of equity. Now, of course, technology, right? What can technology do to empower people to realize their potential? So technology is a wonderful tool, right? It provides so many solutions. But I do want to caution that when it comes to technology, we must be very, very careful. Because technology is not a magical unicorn. Yeah? There are many organizations, many big MNCs that have been applying a lot of DEI technology solutions. Some have reported a lot of success, many others have reported failure. Yeah? So it's very important to understand that when it comes to technological solutions, yes, we need the hardware and the software, but we cannot ignore the what I call the hardware, the human heart, the human aspects of technology use. Yeah? In fact, technological solutions will not succeed if we just say, we just plot the technology and say, nah, here's the solution, use it. We need to also work on the human aspects as well. So what are some of the technological solutions that we can use? Of course, the most popular one right now is remote working. Yeah? A lot of people championing remote working are saying it can empower a lot of people. For example, if I got into an accident and I broke my leg, I can't commute to come to work. But remote working allows me to continue to stay productive at home. It also allows people with other commitments to dependents, like mothers with children, or even adults with elderly parents. It allows them to still remain productive to the organization while looking after their dependents. But then, here's the human problem that comes up. Of course, people in management will then start to wonder, is the person working or is the person slacking? Yeah. So remember the scenario I gave you earlier? Yeah? If we are not aware of the kinds of cultural differences of behavior or even personality differences of behavior, it's very easy for us to misinterpret the person who thinks that staying silent most of the time is actually the polite way to do. It's very easy for us to think that that person is slacking off. Now, okay, since I'm Chinese, I can share an example. There is this thing in Chinese culture where they say modesty is a virtue, right? So in Chinese culture, a lot of people like to play down the works that they do. They will say, oh no, it's not very good. It's not as good as you think it is. Why? Because culturally, the idea is that I play it down so that you will respond and play it up, and that way we can build that close bond together. But imagine if you're talking to people who don't fully understand this kind of cultural differences. What's going to happen? If I play it down, then you don't understand the cultural script on how to respond. You might think, hey, this person is not confident in his abilities. And then this can lead to misunderstandings, misinterpretations of people's performance. So, at the heart of it, okay, if we want to use remote working to empower people, we do need to understand the hardware. That issues of empathy, issues of trust are vitally important. We cannot neglect them. The very fact that the online, we cannot see the other person already causes us to lose a lot of trust in other people, right? So then then is the solution? We need to focus on building empathy, building trust. Of course, the easiest is to have face-to-face meetups and connections. I mean, the face-to-face meetups doesn't have to be in person. It can still be over Teams or Zoom or something like that. But what's more important is we cannot neglect the human aspects. Yeah. Now, another example is online learning. Yeah. The idea that some people may not have the relevant skills to accomplish this task that we give them. So we can make available online learning, online training resources to empower these people. Now, this is really, really great. Yeah. But we also do need to understand that there are obstacles to online learning as well. Yeah. So here are two obstacles. The first is that some people have other commitments. Now, I give you an example. I teach executive education to other adults, working professionals. Some of them say, wow, I have a hard time trying to finish my assignments. I have a hard time trying to consume the learning resources. I ask why? Because my children won't stop pestering me. That's tough. One mother actually shared with me, she says, I can only work on the assignments at like 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. Like on a Saturday night. Then I say, why? What do you do? Then she said, I need to take them out of the house, make them run all over the place until they're so tired. Then after dinner, they knock out. Then I can start studying and doing the assignments, right? So we need to understand that there are these other factors at play. And if we don't address these things, making online resources available, it's not going to do anything to make a difference. Now, one other thing that I do want to highlight is that it's great that we have online resources, but we also do need to understand that a lot of empirical studies have found that people that come from less privileged backgrounds, lower socio-economic status, they also struggle with lack of self-trust to apply their learning. So they may go through the course, they learn so many things, but they may not actually develop that confidence to use it at work. So this is something that we also need to bear in mind. So how then do we solve these issues? Well, first and foremost, we do need to recognize at the end of the day, learning is a very social activity. I mean, the fact is that we're having a learning festival and bringing people together. Yeah, but we also need to understand that for people to translate that not from head knowledge into skills that we are confident in, we need a community of learners as well to support that. Because why? Many a times we gain that confidence by working with other people and getting feedback from them. You know, like if I work with a peer or supervisor and the person says, hey, you're doing this wrong, or they say you're doing this right. Especially that's magical words. You're doing this right. Good job. That boosts people's confidence as they're learning, and that really empowers people to really take what they have learned and to apply it in the workplace. Yeah, so we must not neglect these human aspects as well. Of course, what else can we do with technology to handle all these DEI issues, equity issues, right? Now, many a times we may not be aware of other problems that are causing an unequal playing field. So one of the big solutions is actually a data-driven solution, which is we can collect and analyze data to uncover these areas for improvements. Say, for example, I collect data and then I start to see a correlation. Oh, there's a certain demographic of people who are consistently not participating in any activities that the organization organizes. Instead of saying the quick judgment is to just say, oh, these people are not interested, right? But maybe we can use this correlation to investigate. Maybe there is something within there's some systemic bias or whatever that's actually preventing this demographic, this group of people from wanting to come forward to participate. It can be issues of lack of self-confidence, can be issues of time commitments, or some other factor that it becomes a hindrance to them. So data collection, data analysis can help us to uncover these things. Likewise, we can also collect data and analyze, see where there are also correlations where certain demographics are not performing as well as other demographics. Then we can also again investigate, why is this particular demographic not performing well? Are there factors that are hindering their abilities? Now, of course, if we want to use this approach, and this is a very powerful approach, right? We do need to be very careful with the way we analyze data. And this brings me to the difference. There's a difference between direct measure and proxy measure. Now, I'll give you an example. Direct measure is, for example, I ask you the question, how much sales did so-and-so make? Right? I can just look at the data set, I can look at the spreadsheet, I look at the number. I don't need to use my brain, I just tell you the number, right? If you ask me what is the average, I can again look at the Excel, I can tell you the number. Don't need to use brain, right? That is a direct measure. Proxy measures, on the other hand, require us to take the direct measure and then interpret the data. Because why? The question could be, who's the worst performing salesperson? Now, it isn't always necessarily that dollars and cents tells us who is the best salesperson, right? Or the worst salesperson. Sometimes there are a multitude of other factors at play. So it will be a mistake for us to just look at the dollars and cents and say, this is the answer, right? When we do that, we are actually taking the direct measure and slapping on a series of other assumptions as well. Now, you may say, hey, this is a very bad methodology for analyzing data, but hey, you know what? This is actually standard practice. Now, there's this website, this person claims to be the performance measure specialist, right? And she says, if you don't have the right data, use a proxy measure. And in many ways, many times when we interpret data, we do rely a lot on proxy measures without realizing it. So it helps us to be aware. This question that we're asking is, does the data actually tell us directly? If it doesn't tell us directly, then that's a proxy measure. And the mathematician Cathy O'Neill says, the models that we create are reflections of who we are. Because when we analyze the data to answer these proxy measure questions, we are essentially imposing our mindsets, our prejudices, our biases on things. Here we can impose our knowledge, our values, our biases, and even our ignorance. I'll give you an example, right? Let's say the number of MCs, the number of sick days that a person takes. Yeah. A direct measure is just saying this person took so many days of sick leave for the year, right? But if a person says, this person took so many sick days, must be a slacker, then notice what's happening. We are actually taking our own prejudices about sick leave and we are imposing it in the interpretation. Yeah. Now, linking it back to questions of performance or participation, we must be very careful with the kinds of assumptions we make, because otherwise, if we inject the wrong kinds of assumptions, prejudices especially, it can create new realities. Now, I have a very fun example to illustrate this. Ugly carrots. Well, have you ever seen ugly carrots? Looks so gross, right? You look at this one looks like a claw, right? Do you dare to buy ugly carrots and eat them? You know, some of us are like, ew, so gross, right? But you know what's interesting? Ugly carrots actually make up like 50% of carrot production. 50%. But then you notice why is it that we reject ugly carrots? If you think about it, ginger kind of looks like this, but we're not grossed up by it, right? So what's going on? It's because models have a certain normative influence, yeah? So, you know, I like to talk about this example. You know, when we're young, what happens? Our parents and teachers introduce a model carrot to us. You know, says, a boy, a girl, this is a carrot. And then we will uncritically accept the model and think that this is normal. Then when we see something that deviates from the model, we're going to go, oh, so gross. That is what's going on. Now, why is it that, at least in Singapore, if you go to NTUC, Sheng Siong, or Cold Storage, you don't see ugly carrots? Why? Because we go to the supermarket, we think that carrots has to look like the model carrot, right? If we see an ugly carrot, what are we going to say? Ew, gross. Then we're not going to buy it, right? And then the supermarket manager is going to say, nobody buys ugly carrots, so we will not sell them anymore. Then what happens? New reality, the model has created a new reality. Now we go to NTUC, we go to the supermarket, we don't see ugly carrots anymore, and it reinforces the false perception that all carrots look like this. And of course, you must be wondering, right? If 50% of carrots are ugly and nobody buys it, what has happened to all the ugly carrots? Well, they have all become baby carrots. Baby carrots are actually ugly carrots cut down into size. And the point I'm saying is, if we're not careful, models can really shape people. Yeah. If we don't accept ugly carrots, then what do? We cut the ugly carrots down. If we exercise our prejudices into our models, our analysis models will also force people to change in ways that may cause them undue stress. Yeah. So what's the moral of the story? Yes, we can and should use data-driven DEI solutions to understand where people are being hindered in their performance or in their participation. But we also need to be aware of the kinds of biases that can come into play when we analyze data sets. Now, of course, you must be wondering, if biases are essentially our blind spots, right? So how then are we then able to pick out these kinds of blind spots? Well, we definitely can't do them on our own. We need the help of people from other perspectives, other backgrounds from us. Because, you know, if we all come from the same culture, we will all share the same cultural blind spots. So this is where diversity and inclusion comes into play. And this brings me to the second part, which is how do we empower people to go further? Yeah. So then the question is this now: how does diversity and inclusion lead to greater empowerment? I love this quote by Helen Keller. She says, "Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much." And that is really the power of diversity, the power of teamwork. Yeah, like on my own I can only do so much, but when I start working with other people, they start to identify blind spots and other flaws in my own thinking. It helps me to do better. Now, I share with you a wonderful quote. Since I do Chinese philosophy, right? I share with you a wonderful quote from Confucius in the Analects. He says, "The noble person harmonizes but does not seek sameness, whereas the petty person seeks sameness but does not harmonize." Wow, what does this mean? Because it's very easy to get along with people of the same values, the same mentality, the same mindset, right? We don't need to think about how to create harmony with them. But there is a danger. And what is that? Groupthink. If we all belong to the same group, same mentality, we will all just cheer ourselves on without recognizing our own blind spots. But you know what's the beauty of diversity? The very fact that when we work with people of different values, different backgrounds, we are going to encounter situations where people say no. And you see, here's the weird thing, right? If we meet people who agree with us, right, it doesn't push us to do creative things. If I say, can I do this? Yes. There's no further thought. But if I say, hey, let's do this, and somebody says, no, I don't agree with you, maybe we should look for something else, that no pushes us to rethink the situation. That disagreement generates creativity. It is the obstacle. Sometimes, admittedly, it's not very pleasant, right? But It is the thing that generates that creativity. Tension from diversity creates creativity, and that's what allows us to do better than what we currently are. And in many ways, that diversity also leads to resilience against disruptions. Now, I share with you this very wonderful idea. Abraham Flexner, he's the founder of the Institute of Advanced Studies at Princeton. That's the institute that gave us Albert Einstein and Alan Turing. Yeah? He wrote a wonderful paper. He talks about the usefulness of uselessness. Yeah, because we say useless. So many of us will say, hey, this knowledge is useless. Learn for what, right? And then he says, useful knowledge is only useful because we can see its purpose now. Useless knowledge only appears useless because we cannot yet find a purpose for it. And history has shown time and time again that ideas, knowledge, skills, it's a bit like fashion. Sometimes they are relevant now, sometimes they're not relevant in the future. Something that's useless now can be useful again in the future. Linking this back to diversity, what works for us now doesn't necessarily mean it will work in the future, especially in the face of disruption, technological disruption, cultural disruption. So having that diversity means that we have an array of ideas, management styles, thinking styles, working styles that prepares us for any future disruption. Like this current method doesn't work anymore, we have other tools at our disposal. Yeah. So how does technology come in? Online platforms really helps us to provide opportunities for us to connect with other people. It's the internet presents us with this wonderful opportunity to find other people with similar interests, similar goals, similar objectives. And within an organization, we have a lot of tools already. Yeah? WhatsApp, or even Microsoft Teams, Telegram, Zoom, social media, and all the other things. We have so many opportunities to connect with one another, to find other people, right? And we can then use this technology to create communities and support groups even within the organization. But here's the question. We have all these wonderful technologies, right? Why aren't people connecting? Yeah, we have all the technologies, but in so many organizations, we aren't connecting as much as we wish to. Why? Because online platforms actually change the rules of engagement. Yeah, and if we don't address how online platforms change the rules of engagement, we get all these wonderful technological solutions to connect people. People just won't be connecting. Yeah? So how then can we bring together that diversity, bring together people to connect, bond, and go further together? So we need to understand there are three big factors that change how we behave online, and it also affects how we connect and bond with other people. The first one is anonymity or invisibility. Yeah. The second one is what I call so the first one, anonymous, right? If I am anonymous, then it also affects how I behave towards other people. Yeah. It will affect feelings of trust. It will affect and especially if I can remain unidentifiable, I feel that I can get away with things. Yeah. Asynchronous. What does asynchronous mean? It means that we don't have to respond immediately. Now, in a physical situation, right? Let's say you and I have a discussion. Then maybe I get upset. But then when you see me get upset, you will react. And then when I see you react, I realize, oh, I'm getting upset. And then I will calm myself down, right? But in an online setting, this dynamics doesn't exist. So if someone says something to make me upset, I can just get upset and more upset without realizing that I have crossed the line. And this can create a lot of misunderstandings as well. Now, the third one is interesting. It's called solipsistic injection. Wow, so cheap. What does that mean? Solipsistic injection means that when we read what other people message us, email or whatever, because we cannot see them, because they're invisible to us, we tend to read it in our own voice. And unconsciously, what we tend to do is we also tend to read it injecting our own assumptions and prejudices as if the message came from us. And so this can lead to a lot of misunderstandings. And so this, in many ways, are the three things that really affects how people can bond and connect with one another. Of course, if we already know each other because we see each other in the office, then online is easier, right? We already know people's communicative styles. But if our goal is to connect people who have never met each other before, this will be the challenge, right? So how do we overcome this? The first is to overcome anonymity and invisibility. We need to work on trust. We need to establish and build trust within the amongst the people who are trying to connect with each other. When people begin to trust one another, they'll be more willing to contribute. With regards to solipsistic injection, you notice the word trust and empathy keeps coming up, right? We need to work on empathy. We need to cultivate empathy with amongst people in the organization, so that then we can start to relate with one another better, understand each other better. When somebody sends a message, we instead of saying, hey, why this person write it this way, we start to ask, could this person have meant it in another way? And then once we are able to see beyond our own perception, we are able to understand and relate better. And with regards to asynchronous interaction, we need to understand that a lot of it also stems from unclear norms. So because when we're online, we can't see the culture. It's not like when I go to the physical office, I can see people, I can see the culture, and I understand how to behave myself. Online is a bit hard, and many people are afraid of embarrassing themselves. So how do we overcome that? Then we need to create clear norms. Now, of course, one way is to have good leadership to foster trust, relationality, and provide clear norms to encourage online connectedness. So we can encourage people to take on leadership roles to create opportunities for connection, opportunities to connect, to discuss issues together. And they can also be the setter of norms to say, hey, this is good practice, this is not very good practice, let's do more of these things, let's do more of that. But you know this, if we only rely on this, it becomes a top-down solution. There's no diversity and inclusion, right? Then you can alienate people who behave differently. So for this to work, for online interactions to really succeed, we also need to involve that diversity, for minority groups and all that. Bring them together to discuss and decide together as a team. What are the community norms? What are the communicative norms that we want to develop? And we set this as the organizational culture for online interactions. When we start establishing this kind of clear norms, when we start fostering an online culture of trust and empathy, then all our online platforms, all our technological attempts to connect people will start to succeed. Of course, I want to caution technology. One of the drawbacks of technology is that it can unintentionally raise expectations in unsustainable ways. I'll give you an example. So I teach undergraduate students, and one of the things I noticed, right, is that when a student joins LinkedIn, right, they start looking at their friends on LinkedIn, and then they say, oh my gosh, so and so has 5 certificates from an online course. So and so has 7 certificates from an online course. Then what do they feel? It becomes an arms race of online learning to just keep accumulating online certificates. So when we talk about breaking the first barrier, it's all good, but we need to be very delicate with how we set the tone. Because if we don't set the tone correctly, we give the people the impression that we don't just want to level the playing field, we want everybody to keep getting better and better and better. So instead of being collaborative, we're creating a very competitive culture. So if we do this without delicate care, it can go in this way that can be very unsustainable. Now, one other thing is that in many ways, when we talk about technology use, it's also important for leaders to lead by examples by setting tech boundaries. Because in many ways, you and I, after we go through talks like this, we know that people can misread our online communications. I give you two examples. One is, for example, if your boss sends you a message and emails that says, I want this, there are 2 possibilities. One is, I want it now. The other is, I want it but later. But most of the time, we will inject our own assumption into the reading of the message, and we will assume that, maybe the boss wants it now, right? And if we are not careful with our own technological use, it can create a lot of stress as well, because maybe the person wants to knock off from work already, but then gets an email, I want this work done, then the person ends up staying back to do OT because of that misunderstanding, that miscommunication. So in order to avoid this kind of miscommunication, then we need to be aware that as leaders, we also need to set good examples. If we understand that people can misunderstand, then we need to be clearer in our messaging. We need to be clearer about how we want technology to be used in productive ways, because then people below will take the lead from us. So at the end of the day, we do need to recognize technology is just a tool. And as I said earlier, it's not a magical unicorn. It has succeeded in some organizations and it has failed in many organizations. The one thing that makes it succeed and do very well in helping organizations thrive is the human factor. Yeah. So the human aspects are very, very critical. So what we do need to do is, if we rely on technology, that's important, but do not neglect trust and empathy, because these are the two things that will enable all our DEI technological solutions to succeed. So that is all from me. Thank you very much.